If only everything were so simple. Written by Johnny Fist. If everything were so simple, then Andrei Ignatovich would never have become a prosecutor. But he did, because nothing is simple. It was not for nothing that he endured years of humiliation at the parish school. Not for nothing that every day he walked 2 hours there on foot, in torn trousers, worn-out boots, an old threadbare light jacket, which, in his grandfather's opinion, was perfectly suitable for both hot and cold weather, and a shabby hat that was sometimes used to wipe dust from the windowsill. Andrei Ignatovich knew that life was not simple. From early childhood, he had been taught that the right things must be done when necessary, not when you want to do them. He grew up and lived under strict discipline. Rules typical of that generation were imposed on him. He did not resist much, not because he did not want to, but because resistance was beaten out of him. Mostly across the spine, less often on the heels, and very rarely on the face. But that last was the most painful of all. He was a simple boy, but with character. If everything were so simple, then Andrei Ignatovich would never have stolen a whole pood of potatoes from the school and sold them cheaply at the market to buy himself new boots. The winter was brutal, and his leaky footwear had worn out so badly that he could literally feel the snow with his toes. Because of this, he often fell ill, and because he was ill, he was beaten again at home. Illness, they said, was expensive these days, and there was no money for treatment. And so, to avoid another round of physical punishment, he stole the potatoes and sold them at the market. The boots he bought were not new either, but far better than the ones he had before. What remained was the hardest task of all, to explain at home and at school where the new boots on his feet had come from. That was how Andrei Ignatovich first learned to lie and to justify his unlawful actions. If everything was so simple, then Andrei Ignatovich would not have run away from the parish school in broad daylight to a neighboring village just to look at young girls frolicking in the pond on a hot summer's day. A time had come in his life when women's bodies attracted him more than the priest's teachings about how one ought to live properly. The priest scolded him for such behavior, but Andrei Ignatovich always found the right argument to counter his mentor. Over time, he learned to emerge from such disputes unbeaten. What amused him most was hiding the girls' clothes while they were in the water. Watching from a distance as they climbed out of the pond and covering themselves with their hands, frantically searched for their clothes gave him a special kind of pleasure. If everything were so simple, then Andrei Ignatovich would never have set off on his travels with just a small bundle and a couple of coins. He desperately wanted to see the world, what it was like and how things worked. He was firmly convinced that he had already outgrown his little village. It could no longer surprise him in any way. It only filled him with boredom and melancholy. He walked on calmly, a smile on his face, knowing that ahead of him awaited something new and far more interesting than anything he had seen in his village. The world was vast. He knew that, and for such a great man as he considered himself to be, it seemed as though it had been created just for him. If everything was so simple, then Andrei Ignatovich would never have become a prosecutor. He spent 5 years roaming the country in search of an occupation he wanted to pursue. In some places he deceived people. Elsewhere he obtained a sweet position through deceit. Somewhere he caroused, somewhere he worked, and somewhere he simply lived. Eventually he crossed paths with a prosecutor who offered him a job as an assistant. At first Andrei Ignatovich resisted. It went against his nature, but with no money to his name, he agreed. After a year he understood just how lucrative the work was. He acquired a taste for it, gained experience, observed closely, and decided to become a full-fledged prosecutor himself. Money could be obtained quite naturally through deception, without actually being labeled a swindler. He liked that endlessly. He spent the remaining 36 years of his life as a prosecutor, amassing a considerable fortune, which in his old age he squandered on alcohol and entertainments. He died with a smile on his face, satisfied with the life he had lived. If only everyone were so lucky.